Welcome to the People Solve Problems podcast. I have a special guest with me. My name is Jamie Flinchbaugh, and today we have Renee Kaspar. Renee, how you doing?
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yep, really glad to have you here. We go a ways back, but little introduction for everybody else. Renee is the author and workplace strategist of Renee Kaspar Labs. Um, 30-year HR veteran, author of forthcoming book HR Confidential, exploring how to lead and live through the great transition while the ground is shifting beneath us. Your focus has been on reclaiming personal agency, practicing stewardship as we navigate the unknown, and architect what comes next together. So, lots of uncertainty in the world at a organizational level, geopolitical level, and an individual level. Uh, so, so let's just start with the great transition. What does that mean to you? What should it mean to everybody else?
So, the great transition to me means like a moment in time where it's a systems transition. Everything that we know, everything that we engage in is about to shift. And it's interesting because I'll be on calls right now with other HR leaders and professionals. And when we talk about one part of our system changing as a result of AI, we realize it's everything that's changing. So, as we change work, we have to change education as well. So when I think about the great transition, it is that nothing that we know today will look the same in 10 years, or there may be fragments of it, but everything that we are used to and accustomed is going to change. And yeah, it's funny. I've been likening it, and then I step back off the ledge to this. I've been likening it to raising a child in some ways, as everything is new. As a new parent, people can potentially relate to this. Is as a new parent, you get this baby, you bring them home, and you're terrified, and you don't know what to do with it, and then you figure out what to do with at that child, and then they grow into something you know what to do, and then it changes again, and it changes at such a rapid pace that you're barely able to keep up with. The only thing that's different about that kind of transition for a new parent or in a person raising a child is that there's a roadmap. We're now going through a great transition where we have to figure this all out on our own. And there's so many competing forces at the same time, as you shared, geopolitical issues. We've got wealth division and that great divide. We've got wars going on. There's so many things simultaneous, and of course the technology. So it's a lot happening. And that's what I think of the great transition, that we're all living through one moment in time where the world is changing under our feet, and simultaneously nobody can be shielded. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter what age you are.
yeah. Yeah, and that's I think the fact that we can't be shielded means that we have to at least pay attention. Um, and in a systems transition, as you mentioned, a lot of things can change at once. So you can take a wide aperture, you can take a narrow aperture, but in a system, uh, do you start to pay attention to the whole picture? Do you pay attention to the points of leverage? Do you pay attention to the connections? What are what's the most useful things to sort of pay attention to when everything's changing?
My goodness, that is such an incredible question. What I've done in the past, again, I've done change management during the digital transformation multiple times. And in fact, you and I worked together on some of that. And for me, it was like having an end state that we were trying to move to, and then you pay attention to all the levers that need to move. I think here, I think you have to find an anchor, and from that anchor, then look at all the pieces that are connected to it. And so I think right now the one anchor when I think about the workplace, which is my specialty, is the anchor is every role is going to be different. Every person will be doing different work. So what is that? What does that anchor mean in a system? Well, how do we pay them? How do they grow? How do we hire them? How are their benefits working? Do their benefits remain the same? Um, how do we evaluate performance? So I'm looking at that one system, but there are multiple systems around that. Like, how does the educational system feed into it? Does it feed into it? Is education meant for work as it once was? But you have to have an anchor. I think you have to look at what's that main piece, and then you realize what's changing around it. And then from there, the way that I would approach it in order of importance for the anchor to move as freely as it needs to get to that next level, that's what you start to move next. Like you've got to figure out how do you loosen the anchor for movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, in that spirit, as you mentioned, everything's changing, and it's hard to be shielded from it. Even if you're not in the working world, right? You use Google search and you're getting AI answers, and clicking on websites now is less frequent than it used to be as a result. All the way to, you could have a text thread with friends and you're getting AI generated memes when you share funny jokes with each other. So even if you're completely disconnected, you're not shielded from all of this. Um, all the way to, a data center goes up in your neighborhood, even if you still use a flip phone. So in that sort of loss of agency, um, agency isn't binary, right? It's not fully off, it's not fully on. So what does that loss of agency feel like? And again, we're not going to fully on, fully off. What amount of agency, or what does gaining agency feel like in those environments?
Well, so it's really interesting because I think about everything in the context of work. It's funny, just recently I watched The Devil Wears Prada, and I couldn't help but see the work aspect of it rather than the
Right.
fashion. So
Yeah.
my entire world just kind of circles around this one piece. So I'm probably going to talk about it from that space rather than agency at a broader level. And so, what I think loss of agency looks like and feels like in this moment in time is anxiety, fear, a sense of overwhelmed natures. It's uh, burnout. We know that burnout is at an all time high at a level that we've never seen. Lack of trust is another area. Like so, when I think about lack of agency, it feels like I have no more control. I've lost control over my way of being. So I what I do is sometimes is I go backwards to look at the current, to look at the future. And when we look at the IBM days, like the 1950s or 1960s, you graduated college, you got a job, you're going to be at IBM for 40 years. And I use IBM because it was a staple of that time, like if you got that job, right? And so you had this stability. You kind of knew what you could predict and where you would go, and any behavior you had would lead to one course or another, right? So that gives you agency because you kind of had some control. I think what's going on now with the emotions I just shared, fear, anxiety, burnout, all of that, that's coming from a lack of control. Will I have this job? What will my job look like? Will my children have jobs? What will my children's jobs look like? For our generation in particular, right? Like we're thinking that if you're a millennial, like how will I support my family? Like so I think the loss of agency comes from the sense of not knowing, not trusting. And it's interesting. I spoke to somebody just before this and I asked her, you are someone that I believe has tremendous agency, which is no matter what happens to me, I will navigate through it. And you put the anxiety to bed. Help me understand what that looks like. And she said, agency is learned. I didn't just have it. It's something, it's something that I figured out how to do because you have to quiet the fear that you like, and right now, the fear that's running rampant through everyone is everyone's replaceable. And she said, and I heard that in my head growing up. And so basically what I did was is I learned how to look inside, understand my own value, know what I was worth, know what I could always sell if I left one place to another. And so I thought that was a really powerful statement in agency. It's letting go of the fear and looking inside and understanding your own inherent value, and then figuring out what can you do with that value to create the world that you need to support yourself and your family.
Yeah. So I
And
want to
then
come I want to come back to that agency as learned in a second, but first, that anxiety side, that fear side, as you work with organizations, are you seeing more variation or gradient of that fear across generational differences, or are you seeing more of it across different levels in the organization? Um, there's a lot of belief, oh well, Gen Z will come in AI native, but that's not really proving to be true. There might be more resistance in Gen Z than Gen X. So are you seeing more generational differences, or are you seeing more about where they are in the organization?
Such an powerful question. Um, uh, so I'm doing a lot of interviews for the book. And so let me share with you a little bit about the book and then answer the question. So the book is it's called HR Confidential, and it's about what happens in the room and the decisions that got made and how they got made and why they got made. And they weren't necessarily human oriented. And so, how do we now make this moment in time, this pivotal moment in time, something that we become more human oriented with? And in doing the interviews, I've interviewed Gen X, Gen Z, and millennials, and also I've just left a large corporation, and that had all of those different generations as well and different levels. So, what I would say is, I think they're all equally anxious for different reasons. Um, I think the Gen Z, interestingly, I don't know if you saw some of these different stories in the paper that some of the Gen Zs were booing anyone that would speak about AI at a graduation ceremony, which is interesting. So they're really fearful because they don't have a playbook that their parents can pass down to them as what happened with us, right? They're going into this really dark space and they just don't know what to expect. And so I see it in the interviews that I'm having. Actually, one person I interviewed in HR in a pretty prominent a role said that she's actually seeking therapy because she's overwhelmed with the change and then leading people through the change, which I thought was really fascinating. Um, then what I would say, the millennials, um, they're tired, different than the Gen X's. So the Zs are kind of like, what's going to happen to us? This is what I'm experiencing. What's going to happen to us? We want to learn this, but we really don't want to learn this because if we learn this, we may not have a future. That's something I am seeing. Like, and my daughter is resistant. It's really interesting. She's like, I want to write my own stuff. I don't want to use AI. I like my brain. I want to use my brain. I'm like, that's great, but maybe we build some agents that help you work more effectively. But there is a rejection for sure. The millennials are kind of saying, "I'll do it because I have to, but I'm really exhausted and I'm really burnt out, and I don't think this is fair, and I'm really concerned about what this means for me getting to the next level." Because what we're hearing is hierarchy may die, and we're kind of, like, in this space where, like, we're hoping to get to the next level, but we don't know now if we'll ever get there. So I think that's fascinating. And I think the Gen Z, because most of us that I know in the Gen Z, not Gen Z, Gen X, most of the Gen X people that I know are the leaders. And so, um, I'll say about our generation, what I'll say about our generation is that we generally embrace change. We always have. We're generally change resistant, like resilient, not resistant, change resilient.
Mhm.
And so what I see from our generation more so than any of the others is our willingness to accept it and integrate it and figure out how to use it and navigate it. But I think we have to bring the other generations along. I think our generation, though, seems to be more afraid of the ageism as a result of that.
Yeah.
And so, and I hear that a lot. And are we going to age out and are skills not going to be strong enough? So I think that that's that. Um, Leaders are obviously ones that are adopting it, and I see a level of excitement. I'm taking a lead with AI class, and I see people at our level, um, just really like having these aha moments and wow, I can't believe that it can do this, and just so thrilled with its capabilities. I don't see that at the generations below us.
Mhm.
Did
Yep.
I over answer that question?
No, I think it's very interesting because the reasons why, I mean, even if people I identify with this particular generation, and the reasons you gave, understanding the reasons can help them find their agency, right? They better unpack what's going on. And yeah, our Gen X, you did out yourself as Gen X when you said you saw this in the paper. Um,
Yes.
so uh,
So
which
funny.
I didn't even see it in the paper, uh, but yeah, it is different for different reasons, and of course, I'm always a proud Gen Xer of the resiliency that Gen X tends to represent. So identifying and understanding the anxiety, the fear, the causes, all that's part of it. The learned agency, I do want to return to that. Basically anything you want to learn, you kind of need to practice, right? What's your guidance, experience, evidence, whatever, around how to practice that? How do people, if somebody says, "Yeah, I want to learn agency, so I'm going to start to deliberately practice," what would that even look like?
So interesting because the quote got thrown at me right before we met, and it's something to really like, and I wanna go back and forth on this one if we can, because I think it's such a powerful quote, right? I think to me, practicing self-advocacy is always one part of agency, right? Understanding your value. I believe building your resiliency. I would say another part of agency is curiosity. Because I think when we're curious, we're constantly learning, and that constant uh, growth mindset enables us to feel like we are capable of reaching any challenges, which then gives us agency to know we can get through this. I think in this day and age that we're living in, I think you need to, be aware of what's going on around you. I think, if you turn it off and say, "I don't wanna know anything about it," and I think then it goes the opposite of curiosity, but I think you're gonna have a great deal of risk, and that's where anxiety is gonna kick in, at a higher level. I think, like, again, a new term or a new line that came to me was this, and, or this line, and so I'm still thinking about it. I don't know what your thoughts are because it is really powerful that agency is learned, and it is.
Yeah.
And so what would you how would you kind of help define that a little bit?
Yeah, I think all those things are part of it. I think also, and I'm, I'm a naturally let's manage the risk, but I think if you start writing stuff down and, in a journal's fine, but there's better ways, whether it's problem statements or using structured tools for decision making, whatever that might be,
Mhm.
starting to write it down makes it more tangible instead of loose connections, you start to see them better and understand them better. And as part of that, if you really kind of lay out, well, yeah, even just do a probability tree.
Mhm.
What are the scenarios I'm worried about, and what's the probability that they come true? Most of our worst days aren't as bad as they seem. Most of our best days aren't as good as they seem either.
Well said.
Um, and so, it's not all doom and gloom. The worst things that happen often don't. Worst things that could happen often don't. And bad things happen without a doubt. Bad days can be very, very bad, but all of them being as bad as we imagine, very unlikely. And I think that helps. I also think breaking it down. Breaking problems down help you not see it in aggregate, but see it in specificity. And so, let me deal with this problem and this part and this element, and okay, I can't solve that part, but let me go try and solve that part. And I think I think all that helps, just a little bit. So
I think it's powerful because I think that, um, e not eliminates, but it minimizes anxiety. When you're able to look at it and approach it little by little, I think that that's incredibly powerful. The other thing that may sound hokey, but, it's something that I heard Warren Buffett do, or it I quickly was passing through on Instagram or one of the social media scrolls that I was doing, and it said something around every time you face something, what are the 3 positive things that can come from it? And so I think as opposed to going into a negative spiral, which can happen very quickly, particularly with the way our world is set up, everything I think fear sells, and I think there's a lot of fear being thrown at us. And so I think what we need to do is look at what positive thing could come from this and what do we need to do? And spin it back. And I'm not talking toxic positivity, but to look at it in a way with a different lens.
Mhm.
And I kind of want to circle back to that part that fear sells. Right now, we're in that cycle of fear selling and coming at us really fast. And if you consume that, you're going to lose your agency.
yeah,
Like, So you have to be really careful about what you let in, and
Yep.
when you let it in, how you're digesting it.
Yep. I think that's fantastic advice. Um, Before we run out of time, I do want to cover this specific dimension or thread, and that's just going back to the core of being an HR leader. Um, you know, a lot of what we discussed so far applies to any leader or any individual trying to navigate this. What's your learning so far, advice so far for HR, whether they're CHRO or an HR generalist? What are the highest leverage levers that they can pull to help the people around them through this navigate through this?
I think that this goes back to stewardship. I think that HR is going to need to make a massive change in who we are and how we identify. So recently, there was I don't know if you read this article or saw this. There was a CEO out in Silicon Valley that fired his entire HR staff.
Yep.
Now, what I found really fascinating, not only about him doing that, and I disagree, and like if I can go into a whole bunch of things on that, but what I found really fascinating about it was were the comments that were below several of the videos or the analysis around it, around how hated this profession is. Like it was really, really interesting. So that really struck a chord with me. And I've been speaking in my interviews with other HR leaders about this, like how we are seen, how we are perceived is a really big issue. And I think that the advice I would give to people in this space is we need to change that perception through stewardship, through this moment in time. This is going to be, again, the biggest change we have ever seen in our lifetimes and in generations. And this role or this space can continue as it is and administrative and draconian, and the place that people are afraid of, or we can be the steward, the conscience, the ethical part of the company that's helping drive this in a way that's understanding the value of humans and how they're receiving it today. Like we need as leaders to tap into the fact that people are burnt out, that people are exhausted, that people are fearful, and figure out what are the solutions, what's the root cause of that, and then how do we help drive a more stable organization, building, with our people together. I think that, like, that's the advice I would give to a lot of people in my space is we need to rethink who we are, how we show up, how we're perceived, because perception is reality. And if I open up a YouTube, so I don't know if you can hear the barking behind me, which I apologize for. If I open up a YouTube today and I see thousands of people bashing on that function, or which is ours, then that perception is their reality, and we need to move to a different space. So that's I hopefully that answers your question, but that's the advice I'd give people today.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know you're talking to more HR leaders and interviewing them. And for those that want to sort of continue this conversation, watch for the forthcoming book, HR Confidential. Renee, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your perspective.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Jamie.